Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business podcast covering all things tech, engineering, innovation and motorsport. Hosted by me, Chris Broome.
And me, Fiona Pawley. This is a series of unscripted conversations with leading business owners and high-tech talent, talking about their experiences within the Silverstone and motorsport business communities. Welcome to this next episode of Inside Silverstone. Today, I am talking to Alex Keys, the Sales and Marketing Director for Dumarey Flybrid. Welcome to Inside Silverstone, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Fiona.
Good. Well, we're coming out of our festive period, launching straight into the new year. And you, as in Dumarey Flybrid, you've got yourself a new look. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so Dumarey Flybrid really launches now, January 2024. So Flybrid has a long history at Silverstone and as a company as well. We were really founded out of Formula One, which explains why we're here at Silverstone. So back 20 odd years ago, Formula One decided it wanted to do KERS, kinetic energy recovery, as part of its technology drive and part of leaning into green credentials. But back then they didn't tell anyone, here's how you got to do it. They said, work it out, go away, recover energy and use it in cars. And the engineers, as they do, looked at a number of ways of doing that. And three obvious methods came to mind, which is batteries, supercapacitors and flywheels. And Flybrid Systems, as it was back then, was really founded to work on flywheel kinetic energy recovery systems. So as the Formula One car brakes, spinning up a flywheel, which runs in a vacuum, and then as it comes out the corner, using that energy again. And there were several companies set up to do all these things. Unfortunately for us, before the flywheel ever ran on a Formula One car, they changed their mind slightly and decided that batteries was the future. And you see that we still have battery kinetic energy recovery systems on Formula One cars, but now everywhere I have them on my road car as well. So they've really provided a great example of how Formula One technology goes global. Almost every battery electric vehicle now does that. Although it didn't run in Formula One, the flywheel then went on to run in motorsport. So it ran at Le Mans. Porsche used flywheel energy recovery systems. Today, they're generally not used in motorsport, but instead, Flybrid went on to commercialize that in the construction and industrial space. So we took the learning and the technology we developed for Formula One and turned that into a flywheel energy storage system that we use in construction and power technologies. That was, so it went from Flybrid Systems, it went to become part of the Torotrack Group, who were a transmission company. Out of that, it was purchased by the PUNCH Group, which we can talk about a little bit later, but they are a mobility company. So during 2023, the owner decided to rebrand his entire group of companies, naming after himself. So his name's Guido Dumarey. So he took this company, which was named Punch after a metal punching business that he used to own, and rename it Dumarey after himself and his family who own and run the businesses. So yeah, from January, we are Punch Dumarey.
Fantastic. And as you say, lots of people would have heard of PUNCH Flybrid, in particularly in the Silverstone technology cluster, and you've been a very well-established business, a bit wearing different masks and under different names and different guises. There has been some continuity in terms of personnel, and in terms of the engineering integrity, let's say, has kind of evolved through the lifeblood. So what is Dumarey Flybrid looking for in 2024? What are the kind of optimum relationships, partners, clients? What are we doing now with Flywheel?
So the last few years have been about developing the technology and proving it out in the industrial space, which we work in. So to give you an example, one of the things that we do with our flywheel technology is decarbonization in construction, where we are using very large diesel engines on building sites. We're able to deploy the flywheel, reduce the size of that engine, which in turn reduces the cost of renting or buying the engine, but also reduce the cost to run it, and in turn, the CO2 emissions. So we've spent the last few years getting that technology out there, testing it, trialing it, and making a few refinements. So I think for us, really, 2024 is the year of scale up. So we're going to go from a company who sold the vast majority of our production to the UK and really set our sights abroad. So our plan is to start looking for customer and strategic base beyond the UK. First, starting where Dumarey has existing footprints. So the wider group already has operations in Belgium, in France, in Italy, for example. So starting in those countries where we have a physical and legal presence, but I think scaling up pretty quickly across Western Europe, where we'll probably look at direct business, where we're able to take orders and fulfill them directly, but also into markets where we'll partner with local companies, agents and distributors who will resell and also maintain our product. So looking across the Middle East, North Africa, probably into the back half of next year. Mm-hmm. Certification for the United States is also planned. So I'm looking to make market entry, perhaps the end of this year or beginning of 2025 into the North America market. We're working through details of that now. But this is all possible because the technology has really proven that it does what it's designed to do. It's an extremely robust, reliable energy and storage and power delivery system that has a huge number of uses.
Yeah. And let's talk about those uses a bit. You talk about construction. I might be getting this wrong, but it's kind of the surge of power is right, where you can make the biggest economies in terms of applying the flywheel. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So flywheels, the technology has been around a long time. They don't store very much energy. If you think of a battery on an electric car, it stores a lot of kilowatt hours, a lot of energy. What flywheels are very good at is delivering a lot of power. So they take a relatively modest amount of energy and deploy it very, very fast. Now, when we think about, and the classic example on a construction site is a tower crane because it has very big electric motors. When we think about starting those electric motors requires a very high amount of power for a very short amount of time. If we were to select a diesel engine alone to run that tower crane, we'd select a very large diesel engine just on the basis that it can deal with that brief spike in power. Because if it can't, it won't be able to maintain the electrical grid and it will essentially shut down. But by picking a diesel engine that's so large, actually most of the day it's sat doing nothing, which is terrible for it. It's sat there idling. And some of these generators have very large engines, 8, 10, 12, 15 litre diesel engines, sat to idle. They're burning fuel the whole time. Not only that, but with modern emissions regulations, they also have diesel particulate filters and specific catalytic reduction, this AdBlue. And you imagine if you bought yourself a lovely new diesel Audi and left it idling on your drive for a week, it's probably not going to be very healthy. It's going to block up the diesel particulate filter. It's going to use too much. These engines are not designed to be sat at very low load. So the flywheel has a number of benefits. Firstly, it charges up when the crane isn't working. And then when the crane goes to do a lift, just that couple of seconds when it's starting the big electric motor, it provides a sudden burst of power through the generator to the motor, which helps get it started. Once the lift is moving, the power requirements are more modest and the diesel engine can take over. But we can cut the diesel engine by a factor of 1.5, 2, 3, or sometimes even 4. So we go from a very large engine to a much more moderate sized engine. That moderate sized engine then does a bit more work. So it's allowing the diesel particulate filters and these exhaust treatments to work properly. So we're providing a sort of dual benefit. Rent a smaller diesel engine, use less fuel, and the smaller engines that you have will work better.
And still have the same, if not a better outcome.
That's the plan, yeah. The crane driver in that case shouldn't notice any difference. And I mean, I talk about cranes, but anywhere where we have a sudden spike in power, and as you walk around a large construction site, you see them everywhere. These are what they call hoists, essentially temporary building elevators. A site might have lots and lots of them. Welding equipment, pumps. Again, there are reasonably basic electric motors, which are sometimes starting and stopping many times a day. And where they're powered by diesel, they use a disproportionately large engine. We're able to deploy on lots of applications, quarrying and mining, things like this. I'm certain there are applications that we have not even considered yet that customers will come forward with. But just with what we've identified, there's plenty of scope for expanding the breadth of our sales efforts.
Amazing. And tell us a bit more about Guido Dumarey and kind of the development of the organisation. As you say, they've got businesses already running in kind of mainland Europe, and you're looking for that expansion. But give us a little colour of Dumarey to come.
Yeah, Guido's a very interesting gent, and he's a professional in buying and turning around companies. And when you look on our website, you look back through a list of stuff that he's been involved in, which is exceptionally broad, including communications, satellite stuff. So the last 10 years have seen him focus in on a business that really works for him, which is sustainable mobility. So essentially acquiring and developing companies with synergy in transport, specifically sustainable transport. So to give you a flavor of some of the big business units, the largest single business unit is an ex-General Motors transmission facility operating in Strasbourg. And this is a very large factory. General Motors are on a mission to, bring all their operations into North America, essentially. They're consolidating and they're closing facilities across a number of continents. You'll see that Holden has gone from Australia, for example. Many of the General Motors brands, have now been sold on. And this particular work, they started off in the 1950s building 2-speed automatic transmissions, and they went through the whole cycle of building GM transmissions. But eventually they became an asset that General Motors no longer wanted. And disposing of a large factory like that, especially in France, that's quite difficult. That involves paying a lot of pensions, paying a lot of people redundancy money. There's some significant political pressure. And Guido, like a lot of very successful business people, of course, sees an opportunity and manages to negotiate a very sensible settlement through. And of course, it turns out that it's easier for General Motors pretty much to give away a plant than it is to close it. If they can give it to someone who will take on the running costs, keep the people employed. So that's what he did. He took on this works in Strasbourg, invested significant capital to bring the tooling up to speed and move it from simply doing transmissions into more modern things such as electric drives and so on. Adding to that, companies, for example, within the group who do diesel engine research. It's a group in Turin. They are now known as Dumarey Engines. Previously, it was PUNCH Torino. That was another General Motors asset, their diesel engine research facility. So clearly some diesel engine research, it's a sunset technology, but some research still needs to go on. But around a third of that facility has been converted into hydrogen. So hydrogen fuel cells and hydrogen combustion. So it's really, you see the strategy here, it's making money on the sunset technology, investing the profits in cutting edge stuff. And where Flybrid comes in, we do, like I mentioned earlier, we have this decarbonization solution for construction, but we're also able to use larger scale flywheels in things like off-road machinery, in diggers and trucks, in heavy duty on-road machinery. So buses, HGVs, all that is possible. And when you see the confluence of large and small transmissions, you see engines, and then you see flywheels, I think it makes sense how this sort of integrated approach to business starts to work.
Yeah, amazing. Lots of exciting stuff. And like you say, not letting it all get thrown in the bin, but actually kind of future-proofing not only for the people, but also for the development of the technologies is really essential. So how would you're fairly new to Dumarey Flybrid. In your career, who's been mentoring you, or where have you sought, advice and counsel in terms of the decisions that you've made?
Essentially, actually, I actually think people who I no longer work with directly have been my best mentors. So I'm lucky to have had a variety of bosses in different places, in different countries. I've worked abroad a little bit and for large American companies and startups. And it tends to be those people who I have worked with in the past who make the best mentors now, simply because they always have that sense of perspective. It's the same reason marketing, even a well-funded marketing department, hires an outside consultant to get that sense of distance and perspective. So I'm lucky that before here, I've worked in a number of large and small companies, and yeah, when I'm considering big decisions, I just want that sense of distance and scale. I'm able to call some of my bosses, even from 10, 12 years ago, and say to them, forget the details of the technology. I've got, this is where I am and this is where I want to get to. What would you do? Because sometimes I call it the curse of knowledge. Sometimes I know I can't do something because that's the knowledge that I have, but they don't know I can't do that because they don't know, and they solve it in a completely different way that I'm too close to the problem. And I think for me now, those mentors, that level of perspective is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Kind of, we collect people along the way, and you might only tap into them in certain moments of, let's not always put it under crisis, but actually that sort of, they know you, they know your experience and have worked together, and actually having that external view. I mean, you may or may not take their advice, but it'll certainly give you a different perspective, which is always helpful.
Absolutely. Someone who's solved a similar problem before, how did they do it and what would they have changed? Just getting that is helpful. And there are obviously people within the business who've been to this a few times, but someone outside who doesn't know the details, sometimes it's a disadvantage, but often it isn't. This is why we use external consultants for so many things, and why business consultancy remains a big industry, because they have that distance to give them they're not emotionally invested in the way that I would be.
Yeah, and it's actually, you've led that really nicely in for me. It's actually what coaching does, because quite often, particularly with engineers and technically minded people, they think they want coaching, and actually what they want is mentoring. And mentoring is coming from a place of similar experience, generally hierarchical, more experience, more years served. Whereas actually the brilliance of coaching is, I as a coach, I don't need any technical knowledge, and I don't need any political internal knowledge. I am a complete third party to that type of conversation. And in that conversation, I have the ability to challenge in a way that the internal narrative of we've always done it this way, or that those kinds of things, it's far easier with a coach to really start unpacking learned behavior, habits, all of that kind of stuff as well.
And I would say this company is one of the best I've worked for not just saying, oh, we always do it that way, we'll keep going. But it's natural human behavior. If you don't fight against it, it's the natural ground state to fall back to, oh, let's just not change that. Or no, that's how it has to be. And someone coming in going, but why? No, but really why? Sometimes you just need someone to break you out of that pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dumarey Flybrid is located at Silverstone Park and is very much part of the Silverstone Technology Cluster. And you're a relatively small organisation, would you say, sort of 50, 60 people with the organisation? So what does it mean to Dumarey Flybrid to be part of that community at Silverstone Park?
Yeah, you're right. I think 50, 60 is about right. And we've been growing quickly. When I joined just May last year, I think I had 2 people in my department. I now have 6 or 7 with more coming. But still, when I look out the window behind me, I can see, Formula One teams. Now, they have the critical mass to have things on site that they need. If you want to start a five-a-side league, they've got enough people who'll be doing it. For the rest of us here, the smaller companies, that wouldn't really be possible. It'd be very difficult unless you're in a football company or something to have, for example, a five-a-side league. But within the Silverstone Park group, within the cluster, there's an awful lot going on. So whether it's you wanting to do yoga on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock on a bit of grass, or whether you want to go and play sport, things like the food vans and so on. Again, if we were one small company in a small industrial estate, we'd probably be driving down to Tesco's to pick up a meal deal. But here, just the critical mass of people is able to bring in different food and drink, different social events. There's a big barbecue social event at the UTC, the training college here in summer, where we get to go and stand on top of their nice facility and see across the track. And of course, we do get the motorsport side. An awful lot of our customers are motorsport fans, and we make good use of some of the corporate entertainment. Last year, I think we did the Friday. We had a couple of dozen guests come over, took them for a facility tour in the morning, told them about new products, did the classic marketing stuff, and then said, right, that's enough. Let's walk over and have a day watching some Formula One cars, which of course they and our staff really appreciate.
Yeah, amazing. We've been asking all of our guests about what your first car or first bike experience. So what was Alex zooming around in?
Yeah. So my first car, I did my driving test in, and it was my parents' particularly tired Volvo 740 GLE.
340.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting because when I got here, our managing director has a number of old cars, and I walked into the car park and I said, "Wow, that's a D-Reg Volvo 740 GLE, isn't it?" And he looked at me, "What makes you say that?" I was like, "I had the year before." So yeah, it was in blue. So I did my driving test. I grew up in a little village on the edge of Cambridge, so I did my driving test at 17 and a half or something, in where everyone else turned up in their instructor's Micra. I turned up in my dad's Volvo estate, which I think the instructor, the examiner, kind of gave us a bit of side eye and thought it would be a disaster, but it all went fine. And I drove that all around the country. I'm a motorsport fan, like so many people here, so I remember taking it to, I think it may have still then have been the RAC rally in the late 90s in South Wales and all over. So, and I was also a biker as well. My first big motorcycle was a BMW R65. That was on an old W Reg, which I think makes it late 70s. So that's a twin boxer, 2-cylinder 650 boxer twin. What a thing that was. And again, I must have been driving that. I'm going to sixth form, so I must have been 17 or 18. That certainly was a bit different to all the mopeds parked at my sixth form. But yeah, fond memories of both.
Yeah. I equally, my mum's car was a 340 Tank, and when I passed my test, I'd say to the girls, "Don't worry, girls, I'll drive to the club tonight." And it had a manual choke. I don't know if you had a manual choke. And they were so embarrassed, and they were like, "Can you just drop us round the corner and come and meet us later?" And then when we'd fall out at 2:00 in the morning, and I was like, "Don't worry, I'll drive you home." Again, trying to start that thing in the cold and the dark was, not particularly cool, but very robust.
You still remember the registration number?
B424 MMV.
There you go. C109 VNR on that one. I remember it really clearly.
I couldn't tell you my current registration number without looking on my phone. So yeah. There we go. Anyway, right. Well, it's been lovely talking to you. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off this episode of the podcast?
No, I don't think so. It's been great to talk to you. I've been here just a few months, and the pace of change has been very exciting. I think we've got a really bright future. The group has made some really fascinating acquisitions. As I say, I think it takes us down the road of some interesting integrated powertrains with huge potential in the market. So I'm happy to be here, both in the company sense and in the physical sense at Silverstone. And thanks for having me.
Amazing. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks to everyone for listening. And if you want to find out more about the new look Dumarey Flybrid, you can check out in the show notes. Bye. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please give us a 5-star review.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst. To listen to more episodes, please visit insidesilverstone.co.uk. Please note neither Fiona or Chris work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Technology Cluster or Silverstone Circuit.